of the winning dynamics in horror movies is putting together something that we like, something mundane even, something we take for granted every day, and then we'll like twist it with something primal and terrible and nightmarish, destroying that wonderful thing. So like, for example, every Christmas horror movie, right? It's a celebrated holiday, or even like prom night or Halloween, something like that. And then we pervert it with like violence and death. It's the clashing, contrasting aesthetics, right? To see what would happen when we put these two things together. So another example would be like, summer camp is pretty fun until Jason Voorhees shows up, and then there's murder and mayhem. Chucky is an adorable doll for children, but then he stabs people to death. In that same vein of contrast, we get the subject of today's video, the microgenre of horror movies that take place in a shopping mall. It fits, right? Like a totally mundane place that we all take for granted, and then we inject a stabby murder guy, or a disquieted spirit that's haunting the escalators, or just a quintessentially classic zombie epic. You know where I'm going with that one. Okay, along the way, we're also going to take a parallel journey, just touching base, looking at the birth, the life, and the possible death of malls. We should start at the dawn of malls. You know what I'm talking about. Dawn of the Dead is going to be the first movie on our list for sure. Okay, but before that, a few honorable mentions that didn't make the list. I mean, these videos, the microgenre idea, it's arbitrary, right? I get to make up the rules, but I'm trying to follow some sort of rules here. So a few honorable mentions, like Intruder from 1989. It's close to what we're doing here, but it takes place in a supermarket, not a mall. We're not going to do The Mist from 2007, although it's an amazingly great movie. But again, the supermarket isn't really a mall, and we got to have some kind of standards here. P2, also from 2007. That's because it's in an office building parkade, but if I were going to mention it in this list, I would say that it filmed in Toronto, Canada. But yeah, it's in an office building arcade. If it was a mall arcade, parkade, did I say arcade? Parkade. If it's in a mall parkade, then that's fine. But, you know, any underground parking structure doesn't really feel like a mall. We're going to stick to mall. And I know it's arbitrary. Like, for example, there will be some movies coming up on this list that take place in furniture stores. A furniture store also is in a mall. Now, some of those I think are connected to malls, and so then I would be fine with that. But I also think that a furniture store, like a department store, is already so closely tied to malls, more so than just, say, like a supermarket. I don't know. It's arbitrary. Let's move on. I also want to give thanks to Justin from Stormland, which was, he is my very first supporter over on Patreon. Yes, I do have a Patreon, and I have some paying patrons now, which is so exciting. Thank you so much for the first few of you. And I want to do something to show my support and appreciation. I'm trying to grow this channel, and this kind of support is really meaningful to me. It gives me a reason to keep editing these videos. The editing's probably the worst part for me, but I enjoy these movies, I enjoy talking about them, and you showing me your support is just like everything to anyone. Even you don't have to pay money, honestly. The Patreon's free. Go check it out. I have videos up there. I'm trying to do a video a week, but I'm not keeping up with that exactly. But there are exclusive videos that are not on YouTube, so go check out the Patreon. Click the free to join tier is fine. If you got a couple bucks, the tiers are very cheap. I would appreciate it, but not necessary. But I wanted to show some support. So in these days where I've only got a few patrons, I am trying to give back a little bit. And so I'm trying to do a video. At least I've got 3 right now, and I'm going to do a video for each one of these people. So this one's Justin's. I let him pick the microgenre topic, and he did not let us down. This was a whole bunch of fun to put together. So let's see. Sorry, I've got some notes here. Obviously, I've got notes. We're going to go off of notes. So I would also say thank you to Justin. Go check out his music. It's Stormland Band as all one word. It's on Bandcamp and other platforms. Check out what he's doing. He does like really heavy metal that I believe every project that he's doing is thematically connected to Gunpla and Gundam. So lyrics about Gundam, artwork that celebrates Gunpla, and he does builds on his social media and everything. So go check him out. He's also Canadian, hometown guy. So go check that out, please, and thank you. Okay, now let's get back to the topic at hand, horror in shopping malls. Malls are a reflection of our society and how our economies grow. It's not just the styles and trends that they sell, but they're also showing us how we shop. Like, malls were built to bring consumerism out of the downtown core and into developing and flourishing suburbs in the 50s and the 60s. The car culture in North America allowed for these larger structures that everyone could travel to get everything that they needed, or more useless stuff that we want. Within 15 years, shopping malls in America went from a few thousand to over 100,000, with newer, shinier malls pushing the older ones aside. Malls represent culture, right? They show us what people are wearing and what they're listening to, what kind of architecture is prominent at the time aesthetically. They show us what we're buying. Mom and pop shops were out by the 90s. I don't think there's a lot in malls, and DVDs and CDs were out by the 2010s, and now apparently we just buy name brands and smartphones. Malls can also show us who can afford to shop. And in that little nugget is the foretelling of what happened to malls and where they're going. But let's not start at the end, right? Like, we have 4 good decades to enjoy the mall at its best. And the prime example for any horror in a mall movie is always going to be Dawn of the Dead.
What the hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
So 1978, Dawn of the Dead. What am I going to say about Dawn of the Dead that hasn't already been said? Nothing. That's what. But I still feel it's incumbent upon me to at least sort of convey some portion of an iota of the importance and reverence that should be inferred when speaking about any zombie, let alone the foremost pioneer of the genre. Just in case anybody's discovering these movies for the first time, I just want to give some context. I mean, this channel that I do, I didn't want to limit myself to the horror genre, or to spy movies, or blaxploitation, or kung fu cinema, or anything like that. I just love movies, and I love the crossovers of genres and things like that. So, if you're here watching something that I did, on Yojimbo, or I don't know, Ninja Scroll or Tintin, all these various things. Maybe you're not a zombie fan. Maybe you've just heard the name Dawn of the Dead and you don't know. So just in case, we're talking about one of the preeminent genre-defining horror movies of all time. I don't think that's too heavy. For zombie movies, this is like the Bible. Romero did it all. Romero is God. On the various special editions that exist, there are, in fact, I think I got, look at this. I got this special edition here. It's DVD. It's got 3 different versions of the movies. It's got 4 discs, I think it's 4 discs. It's so much. On the various special editions that exist, there are hours and hours of behind-the-scenes interviews and making of featurettes that are giving a good sense of the full picture of Dawn of the Dead and its place in our pop culture history and filmmaking history. I personally am more of a fan of Night of the Living Dead, but make no mistake, from the scope of the film to the commentary on capitalism.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
I could entertain anybody who wants to contend that Dawn of the Dead is the superior film and maybe one of the best of the entire horror genre. But lucky for me, we're not all here for all of that, right? We're just looking at malls. So let's look at this one. This is the Monroeville Mall in Pennsylvania, where Romero is from. It was built in 1969. It's fully loaded with an ice rink, an arcade, a sporting goods store. I mean, an ice rink That's crazy. I've never been to a mall that had an ice rink. I know a strip mall with a bowling alley. Shout out to Old Orchard on Kingsway. The ice rink in the Monroeville Mall is actually the one that was used in the movie Flashdance, and parts of the mall were used for Kevin Smith's movie Zack and Miri Make a Porno. At the time of filming, the mall is still standing, though it's had a fair share of renovations and updates in its day, and it's now currently owned by Walmart, so who knows how long it's going to last now. The concept of survivors of a zombie apocalypse holing up in a mall where they have everything that you could possibly need is just so primal. It's a suggestion in every conversation everybody has had with their friends about what would you do or where would you go if there was a real zombie apocalypse. What, you don't have those kinds of conversations with your friends? That's a little weird. Well, this is, I think, a very understandable solution. You'd be living in a castle, like a fortress basically, with enough space that you wouldn't feel as trapped or confined as if you were in a house or an apartment building. There should be plenty of clothing and food. It's kind of a paradise, really. You've got fountains and indoor trees, but it's a horror movie, right? So Romero's gonna twist the knife, the pressure is gonna build, the safety is gonna be compromised, the isolation, even being in that mall with all that space, is going to be overwhelming, and despair is constant. So this defines the zombie movie genre, is wholly original, and is also the definitive horror in a mall genre movie. Now, I know that we started on a high point, and that there are some shallow cinematic waters going forward with a number of B-movie slashers, but I just want everybody to enjoy ourselves for a little while and not think about the economic reality that actually befell these monuments to consumerism. For the next half dozen movies, we can get a smoothie at the Orange Julius, and then drop a bag of quarters at the arcade, maybe cruise the parking lot looking for girls. Wow. Okay, now I'm starting to sound like a serial killer. The point is, enjoy our time at the mall here, because it's not going to last forever. At least, not like this. "1984, The Initiation." So there's a bunch of sorority pledges that enter a mall at night and endure hazing and then endure. A bunch of sorority pledges enter a mall at night and endure hazing and pranks while a psycho killer stalks and kills them one by one. This is a low-budget slasher that takes place in a mall, judging by the opening scene of a child peeking on their parents having sex and then stabbing them and then following an escaped mental patient as they stalk teen girls. The Initiation wears its influences on its sleeve, and this being a clear case of Halloween envy. The POV shots of the killer, walk and talks with the girls after school, but what it doesn't have is John Carpenter's flair for visual style or the iconic score that supports the entire film. The whole thing is a pastiche of all the slasher gimmicks, like Halloween. There are bad dreams to mimic Elm Street, which just came out in '84, machetes from Jason. There's a peeping Tom murderer guy like in House of Sorority Row, and maybe it's because of all these things that it just doesn't really stand out. It's just so generic. The only name that was in the credits that stood out to me was Daphne Zuniga, who once played a Druish space princess in Spaceballs.
Funny. She doesn't look Druish.
This is her first leading role in a movie. For the actual mall part, it takes almost half of the screen time before we get to the mall, but when we get there, the mall angle works really well. Teens fooling around in the rug department, sneaking in through the freight area, showing off the Christmas displays, going up the glass elevators, hanging out by the information kiosk. You remember those? Where they would pay people to answer questions for you and be helpful, or speed around on rollerblades helping people out. We're hell and gone past those days. I really like this mall in this movie. This is prime mall right here. The open space, the 70s tile. But I think that the muddled plot and the inspired kills drag down this mid-tier movie to a low-tier movie. Especially when one character confesses to the group that she lost her virginity at age 12 to her violin instructor, and in the very next scene her boyfriend kisses her, and then she says that he made her feel better.
I thought you came here to cheer me up.
How do you feel now?
cheered up. A little.
Anyway, it doesn't quite work, but it does spend a good amount of time running through a mall, and that's what we're here for. Next up, 1984 as well, Night of the Comet. Okay, so often this movie is said to be the main inspiration for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Night of the Comet is a fun cult movie. It's got that Day of the Triffids, eerie, empty, lawless world vibe, and probably a little bit of plot lifting as well. Like the main character misses seeing the comet because she was working late at the movie theater, which is similar to the opening of Day of the Triffids, where the main character misses the comet because he's in the hospital with bandages over his eyes. But rather than a super serious attempt at survival horror in a post-apocalyptic landscape, she's preoccupied with dating and Generation X angst. So like think Clueless meets Omega Man. If that sounds like a crazy crossover, you're absolutely right. But the entire movie is brimming with 80s mall culture and style. Now, even though the scenes in the mall only last 15 minutes, the mall, this specific mall, might be the actual star of this entire video. The Sherman Oaks Galleria in the San Fernando Valley is the featured mall in 3 of the movies that I'm listing here, and in addition to that, the mall featured in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, another great mall movie. Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger used the mall, Terminator 2 used this mall, Valley Girl, Joe Dante's Inner Space, and there's even more things that filmed here. And you can always tell when you're watching it from these distinctive white railings that are everywhere on the second level. This is the first movie on our list to use this mall, but the second of 3 movies on this list is going to be our next entry, which is 1986 Chopping Mall. All right, maybe Chopping Mall is the king of this microgenre. Nope. Still Dawn of the Dead. It's not even close, but damn it, Chopping Mall is second only to Dawn of the Dead in the horror in a shopping mall genre. Well, wait a minute. What about the remake of Dawn of the Dead that's coming up? You shut up, you. You shut up. Chopping Mall is cheesy, and it's fun, and it's stupid, and it's absolutely perfect for a B movie. There's a few couples, teens, that decide to spend the night in the mall furniture store, unaware that the new state-of-the-art mall security guard robots have malfunctioned and will now hunt them down and kill them. Now, I immediately thought somebody must have seen Short Circuit the year prior and thought, what if Johnny Five went on a homicidal murder spree, killing a bunch of teens? But it turns out that Short Circuit is also 1986, so it's one of those strange occurrences, maybe parallel thinking, I think it's called, where there's 2 independent sources developing a similar idea at the same time. And Jim Wynorski says that they had been working on the film since 1984. That's a full 2 years, so I have no idea. But the Killbots with their similar tank tread wheels seem like they could have inspired each other. And yeah, it's a Jim Wynorski. Wynorski's a B-movie savant, one of my favorites, one of the most tenacious filmmakers. And Chopping Mall's his second movie, and my second favorite of his films after his first movie, The Lost Empire. Wynorski's career trajectory was tied to the fate of the B-movie industry. As budgets dried up in the 90s and became anemic in the 2000s, Wynorski adapted, and his work suffered from insufficient production, shooting schedules, and the need to cut every single corner. But this is his second movie in 1986, and it's pretty great. It's not a perfect movie, and it's not expected to be, but it at least looks like a movie that you could screen in a theater, and not every Wynorski film can say that. The cast isn't filled with standout actors that I recognize, with the exception of Barbara Crampton, of course, who would have been known from Reanimator, which came out just the previous year, and she has the greatest death of the movie. Sorry, but it's been 40 years. I think the time to heed spoilers is over. Barbara Crampton is always a good addition to your cast, and there were some cameos from Dick Miller, Paul Bartel, and Mary Warnoff. This is just fun. It's an enjoyable twist on the teen slasher conventions. It knows what it is, and it doesn't need to stretch to reach its goals. Great mall, classic mall. As mentioned earlier, it filmed at our hero mall for this video, the Sherman Oaks Galleria, where they shot Fast Times and Commando. And it won't be the last. We have one more example on this list of this genre haunting the Sherman Oaks Galleria, but not this next movie. It'll be coming down the list. So the next movie is 1988 Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-orama, aka The Imp. This is a full moon special in the throes of the slasher formula, but adding a sort of magical twist. A low-budget extravaganza of scream queens, Brinke Stevens, Linnea Quigley, and Michelle Bauer. The Imp is a fun Muppet who escapes from the inside of a bowling trophy like a genie lamp, and he grants wishes to the frat boys and sorority babes who break into the mall bowling alley for their teenage hijinks. Now, when did you ever expect bowling alleys to be in shopping malls? Like, is that a thing? Maybe back in 1988. And just like The Perfect Shopping Mall, this movie has everything you want in a B movie. The TNA factor is high, the characters and the deaths are ridiculous and over the top, there's an evil Muppet in it, and in general, the director, David DeCocteau, has a bunch of nice visual shots that are well lit. The frames are filled with color to make the silly premise more like the cartoon it really is. Most of the cast and crew, including all 3 of the Scream Queen leads, were all reused by DeCocteau immediately afterwards to make this movie Nightmare Sisters, his lesser-known cult sleeper movie. Slimeball was filmed in 12 days, and then right after, DeCocteau took the remaining money in the budget and filmed an entire movie at his rented apartment in 4 days. So for a long time, this movie was considered lost, and is still the only time all 3 Scream Queens were together in one movie. It's since been released on Blu-ray, I believe, and I think that I have a copy of it, but we're not doing that. It doesn't take place in a mall. But it's just interesting that those 2 movies are so connected. The mall in the movie was the Plaza Camino Real in California, opened in 1969, and now renamed The Shops at Carlsbad. The bowling alley, I don't think was in the mall, and is credited as Eagle One Bowling, but it's no longer listed. I couldn't find it. This movie has stood out from the pack for decades now as a cult classic, and it's got its reasons for sure. But it wasn't really my favorite. It's a little ugly and super unpolished, which could be its charm as well, but I think there's probably a lot of mileage gotten out of a title, like Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. Alright, 1988, Hide and Go Shriek. Now, if I thought Chopping Mall was somebody watching Short Circuit and thinking, what if the robots were hunting teens in a shopping mall while they fooled around with each other? Then Hide and Go Shriek, only 2 years later, is like if somebody watched Chopping Mall and thought, what if we took out the killer robots and instead just made it a normal slasher, but just set in a shopping mall? It's a bold choice to make something less interesting, but it's solid, low-budget slasher stuff. If you like the original Friday the 13th, The Prowler, Sleepaway Camp, Prom Night, Terror Train, My Bloody Valentine, the 80s version, stuff like that, then you might want to give this one a try. The mall is more focused in on a furniture store, and there are no actors that I recognized. The killing starts about a half hour in. It's visually very dark, and the killer is uninteresting and generic and kind of boring. There's no visual gag like a mask or a specific weapon. There's one part where he puts on one of the girls' lingerie, but I don't know, that motivation is pretty tired and lazy, and is obviously very transparent attempt to be edgy and play on people's personal insecurities over drag and gay identity. Like I said, it's just kind of boring. But if you like paint-by-the-numbers genre movies, then this checks all of the boxes. Alright, 1989, Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. This is an ill-conceived movie. It's the Phantom of the Mall, like the Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom of the Opera in The Phantom of the Opera was also named Eric. Morgan Fairchild, as mayor, tries to open a new mall on the grounds where the developer burned a man in his house to get the deed. The dead man is Eric, who might not be dead, but only disfigured really, really badly.
I'm still alive, only I'm very badly burned.
And now he's wearing a mask over half his face, and he's not going quietly. He's skulking around in the air shafts of the mall, but that's about it. So I don't know if this is really an adaptation as much as it is just heavily influenced by the opera, but I don't think it adds much in any case. This is also our third and last appearance of the Sherman Oaks Galleria, and while the movie, as a movie, is a bit dingy and not all that charming, I can at least say that as a mall movie, it spends most of its runtime in the mall and showcases various older stores that no longer exist, or strolls past a piano player. You know, they used to actually pay people to play music in the mall as well. Well, they don't pay them anymore. On the Chopping Mall commentary, Jim Wynorski mentions that this mall has since been torn down.
Full screen version, you can see a few people walking up the top of the stairs. They were leaving the theater upstairs.
The Pacific 4, which no longer exists. Like this mall no longer exists.
Yeah, after the earthquake of '94, it got condemned, and they tore it down and built a whole new mall. Not as good as this.
The mall isn't as good, but the movie theater is better.
Aside from Morgan Fairchild, there are two other actors of note that I noted in my notes to make note of. I actually wrote that. Anyway, Pauly Shore, before his MTV Weasel persona, and he's playing the goofy best friend role. And then also Dawn of the Dead star Ken Foree makes a return to the genre in this less than stellar vehicle. Now, I personally didn't think this movie was all that compelling, but I kind of found myself, as I was watching it, looking past the actors and just looking at all the shops and locations in the movie and like what things looked like. And this movie kind of had more than most, I think. But if you think this movie was bad, hold on to your mall Santas for Elves. Elves, 1989. Okay, here's a little trash fire movie called Elves that never got a DVD release. It's a relic of the VHS era. I actually, hold on, I'm sure I've got my copy here. Look. I had to burn my own copy because there was no DVD, but it was on VHS, and so somebody has ripped it, and I was able to burn it onto a DVD. It's not well made. It's not particularly captivating, but it does have all the sleazy accoutrements that an exploitation movie needs, right? Okay, ready? Here, let's do the list. It's a horror Christmas crossover genre. The mom drowns the cat in the toilet. The mall Santa is a lecherous creep groping teen girls. There's a rogue cop, off-the-job store Santa who looks like an old fat Russell Crowe. Seriously, it's weird. There are shootouts with Aryan Yahtzee cultists who work with the elves to create the master race. I'm not even joking.
But about 50 years ago, there was a group that believed in elves that did one hell of a lot of killing. The Nazis.
The Nazis?
Mm-hmm.
They believed in elves?
Oh, yes. They believed in a lot of things. You know, if you could ignore their brutality, you'd have to say they were just a bunch of crackpots.
And incest. And incest.
So you would be the perfect female line, a repository, a receptacle for the pure genetic information that we thought must survive.
You're insane!
But Kirsten, I love you. You're beautiful and you're perfect and I love you.
No!
And technically, this is a department store and not specifically a mall.
Are we gonna be alright?
No, Willie. Gramps is a Nazi.
It's a dingy-ass movie, it's got a crappy ending, but it does deserve a DVD release, at least just for the pure insanity of everything that's in it. Elves. Let's move on. Okay, 1990. We're at 1990, Gremlins 2. Now, I've always said that parody is the death knell for a wave of genre movies. I always use the spaghetti westerns as an example. The Trinity movies and My Name is Nobody ended the parade of deadly gunslingers coming out of Italy. Deadpool and She-Hulk and others that make fun of the genre conventions seek to be reigning over the flagging superhero genre. Even slasher franchises that became too self-aware in their sequels helped to slow their momentum with entries like Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Texas Chainsaw 2, April Fool's Day. There are a bunch of parody movies that came out towards the end of the 80s, and I would say also maybe Scream killed the slasher, because while its popularity did contribute to a brief resurgence of slashers in the 90s, they almost all had to deconstruct 80s slashers or make reference to them or their tropes to be successful and fresh. Well, one of the movies to jump the shark intentionally was Gremlins 2 in 1990. The movie is more comedy than horror at this point, and weirdly enough, I think this is the movie that became like mall parody to end the horror mall genre picture. And let me qualify that remark really quickly. Look how quickly these movies came out. There was 2 in 1984. We're just talking about this list, right? 2 in 1984, 1 in 86, 2 in 88, and 3 in 89. So that's more than 1 a year. And then in 1990, Gremlins 2 comes out, and it stops. There isn't another movie for our list until 1998. And that movie's Chinese. So I mentioned before that there's a 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake, which itself is an indication of the genre going back to the original source, like it's a remake, right? There's a Hindi movie in 2014 that we're going to get to. You see what I'm saying here? And why? Why? Because while technically Gremlins 2 takes place in a state-of-the-art office building, the Clamp Towers, it's actually a parody of mall culture. It's got a food court and a gym and elevators and office space and movie theaters and a controlled indoor environment, and to the axiom of having everything you need under one roof, they even have a genetics lab. Gremlins, like Dawn of the Dead, are offering biting commentary on consumer culture, which is best exemplified in shopping malls. Now, I don't know that Gremlins 2 had any kind of influence over other movies, but it's a fun thought. Whether or not you buy that line of logic, it doesn't help the fact that we don't get another horror mall movie until 1998, and that's not in America, it's in China. The next American horror movie doesn't hit until 2004. So let's do the 1998 movie, Biozombie. Okay. If we don't have American-made horror in a mall movies, we gotta go to China to find one, and what an odd movie this is. Biozombie, also released as Hong Kong Zombie, directed by Wilson Yip, and starring nobody that I'm familiar with. But Yip is a familiar name, and that will only be surprising or interesting once we established what this movie is about, so we'll come back to Wilson Yip. So this is a movie about 2 bummy mall rats who sell bootleg DVDs in this dingy-looking dirt mall. And I call them mall rats because this movie feels somehow influenced by mall rats. The 2 main characters are like a Hong Kong Jay and Silent Bob.
Well, well, well. Do you see what's directly in our path of fortune, my friend? Hi there, girlies. You're looking awfully thin today. New diet?
That's none of your business, you ugly swine.
Seriously, their names are Woody Invincible and Crazy Bee, and they get caught with by a mall security with a joint on them. Side note, by the way, that's what I think Kevin Smith should have done after he had done after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. He should have just made a Jay and Bob horror movie, which I sort of kind of think that like the aesthetics were already established for that. If you watch Freddy vs. Jason, there is like a Jay character that feels like he's in there that's not Jay, which is really odd. Yeah, I think he should have made it look like Scream, and in Scream 3, Jay and Silent Bob have a cameo in that movie, and when you watch Freddy vs. Jason, there's a guy who just looks like a carbon copy of Jason Mewes, but it's not Jason Mewes, and it makes you wonder, like, did they try and get him, and then they were like, this is crazy, or whatever, and then they went with, like, you know, a real actor. Sorry, Jay. But, yeah, I don't know. It would just be better than some of this weird stuff that he's doing, like Tusk, or I don't know. It just feels like it would be a better place for his Mallrats style dialogue if he was writing something that's like a Scream with lots of, you know, like Halloween, where there's lots of sort of teenager, 20-something type characters talking while they're getting stalked by a killer. I think that he would have done really well with that. Anyway, back to the movie. Biozombie itself is a comedy actually as well. Biozombie itself is a comedy as well. These 2 bumbling goofballs accidentally expose somebody to the umbrella serum and unleash zombies in a mall. It's been compared to Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, which is high praise. The comedy's pretty good, and the gore is messy. The makeup effects aren't impressive, but the production's still pretty fresh for 1998. So now that we know what kind of a lowbrow B-movie, fun adventure, horror extravaganza that this is intended to be, let's get back to Wilson Yip. At the time he's doing Biozombie, he's directed a half dozen movies, and I don't know any of them, but his career seems to really pick up speed when he starts to work with Donnie Yen in Killzone in 2005. Then they make Dragon Tiger Gate and Flashpoint before directing all 4 Ip Man films. Like, that's a hell of a run, and a far cry from Biozombie. Like, That is an impressive filmography. The other aspect that we get to enjoy is seeing a mall in China. Now, I'm not an expert, but the main thing that I notice is that there's not a lot of wide open spaces with atriums and courtyards, 2 stories tall with skylights and plants growing in planters next to water fountains, right? These are narrow corridors of glass encased shops, at least in the case of this particular mall. The lights are all an unflattering fluorescent with low ceilings, and everything feels much more claustrophobic. I've got another Eastern mall movie coming up, but first we need to stop back in America and look in on Dawn of the Dead again. (2004) Dawn of the Dead. Now, as mentioned at the start of this video, this is a remake of a classic movie. This falls under the banner of nostalgia as far as the concept goes, but this is also a really good remake. Like, it's genuinely horrific and amped up from where the original was. The zombies are runners, not walkers, and while I don't think he's a great storyteller looking over his entire filmography, Dawn of the Dead is Zack Snyder's first film, and I would argue his best, probably. Like, it's aged the best, and it was pretty impressive when it came out. It doesn't have the cultural clout the original movie has, or the originality, but the execution of this remake is pretty good. It's another example of horror in a mall with most of the runtime spent in these various retail storefronts, which for our purposes in this video is the point. This mall also kind of represents the last wave of the golden age of shopping malls before the Great Decline, where we see the dead malls popping up all across North America. This becomes a real phenomenon in the life and death of shopping malls. There are hundreds of empty shopping malls, and you can find these on YouTube. There are websites dedicated to documenting these places by people who remember going to these places when they were growing up. When DVD stores, video stores, closed, it made sense because most people weren't buying DVDs anymore. But the people that live around the mall, they still live around the mall. And possibly they'd be buying the same stuff that they did before, so seeing these places close is really off-putting, and it's unnatural feeling because the people are still there. This is the era when online shopping starts to make a real impact and many stores become showrooms for better prices online. Now, for this movie, on its own, non-mall related qualities, there are some good parts, and a few bad in my opinion. The cast is pretty great with Ving Rhames and a badass Sarah Polley. She's excellent throughout. Ty Burrell from Modern Family's in it. It's just weird to see Phil Dunphy really playing against type as a sleazy, self-serving, smarmy douchebag. Mekhi Phifer and Matt Frewer are in there, even featuring 3 cast members from the original Dawn of the Dead in quick cameo roles. Now, maybe the best parts are the added ideas. The guy in the store across the way from them playing chess by holding up whiteboards with the moves on them, or having the mall security be antagonists to underscore that most often used theme in zombie movies of other humans being an even bigger threat during a crisis, or the zombie baby, which is really horrible and gratuitous. I don't think it says anything or that it's needed to say anything. It's just awful. As it should be, I suppose, but it doesn't make me want to rewatch that movie very often. And my biggest gripe with the movie is the high contrast look that the movie has. The blacks in the shadow are so dark that actual black people look like silhouettes half the time, and well, except for this shiny skin. It's like they have this sheen that's like a white sheen reflecting on their faces at all times. The highlights are almost solid white and the contrast level is grating on the eyeballs. This is probably done to make the viewer feel uneasy, but I think that's a bit cheap and it doesn't lend itself to favorable repeat viewings. It's just kind of crude. I still think that the 2004 Dawn of the Dead was different enough from the 1978 Dawn to be worth a watch. It's a bit more of the old ultra-violence, and for us, a fair amount of time in a mall. 2014, Dar at the Mall. At symbol. Another international horror in a mall offering, this time from India, Dar at the Mall. At symbol. is just a straight up horror movie about a security guard investigating a phantom or ghost that's maybe been killing people in the Amity Mall that he works at.
Yo. Think about it. ओए, तू मॉल जाता है कुछ खरीदने के लिए, एक चीज खरीदने जाता है, कंफ्यूजन में 10 चीज ले आता है, खर्चा करे तू और कमाए हमारे बाप। एकदम सही जवाब। करेक्ट? मतलब अब पूरे गधे, पूरे। एक और बना दिया यार।
बकवास मत कर। गुच्ची के कपड़े, ज़ारा के शूज, you're a mall in yourself. चलती फिरती मॉल है तू।
It's pretty straightforward, but my limited experience with Indian cinema didn't prepare me for how typically American it feels. I didn't necessarily expect songs and dance numbers, but I did expect some blending of like comedy and action and family fun and horror all together, while this movie is pretty cut and dry. It's a horror movie about a haunted mall. Okay, there is one musical number, but for an Indian movie, it's pretty tame. Like in the context of the film, it's a musical act being performed in a club. So it's not like the movie just starts doing a musical number like a musical. It's got context to it. And for the mall scenes, it gives us the main feature we all want, people wandering around in an empty mall, getting picked off one at a time. They even push each other around in shopping carts, which is a first for this genre. And this mall also has an indoor ice rink. So that's just so very Dawn of the Dead of them. But what it doesn't have are scares, or gore, or much of anything going on outside aside from people scared of a haunted mall. Now, maybe it should be downgraded to a creepy movie. You know, like a horror film ranking demotion. This isn't a horrifying movie, it fails at that, but it is a creepy movie, and it's good at being creepy. (2020) Slacks with 2 X's. It's Canadian, first of all. The Canadian mall horror movie. We got one of those. Tick off the list. It's about a haunted or possessed pair of pants in a mall clothing store. It's sufficiently bloody when it needs to be. It's creative with its kills, which is a plus for horror movie genre fans. And it's pretty funny at times. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's not too dark, which helps sell such a ridiculous premise of killer pants.
Did I not get the memo, or are we talking about a pair of killer pants here?
This is I keep wanting to say killer plants. This is a great example of the retail landscape shifting malls from a place where everyone would go to into like a wasteland of designer clothing brands and smartphone cubicles for like your preferred corporate tribe. The movie's full of current topics of the time like GMOs, worker exploitation, and the hypocrisy of corporate promises with their blatant negligence for workers. And it has Bollywood music in it. Actually, the Indian connection is really good, and I don't want to give away the plot because this is a relatively new movie and you might want to seek it out. The deaths, the creative concept, and the humor pair well together. Pair well together. Pair of pants. Yeah, that's the level of comedy that we're on here, and no, I can't do any better. Anyway, the themes are actually deeper than the silly concept. I really like this movie. Both Slacks and the following film, Black Friday, are dripping with cynicism of late-stage capitalism, a far cry from the youthful, eye-rolling teens in the 80s movies. (2021) Black Friday. So we got Bruce Campbell, Michael Jai White, and Devon Sawa all trapped in a Toys R Us type store on Black Friday as zombie-like monsters take over. It's everything you're thinking it will be and less. The talent in the movie is selling more than it can deliver. Bruce isn't going to be Ash. Devon Sawa was underwhelming, and Michael Jai White has zero character, and not because he doesn't have the ability, but because there's just nothing on the page for him.
Chris,
What the fuck?
It's not really a Christmas movie, but it's around Christmas. The whole thing feels undercooked, like a decent first draft that needed more work. The monsters could have been more interesting, but we spend all of our time with our human resistance quibbling about overtime and personal regrets in life, so despite some promising makeup effects, they're basically just generic zombies for all intents and purposes. I really shouldn't crap on this movie. It's not a horrible movie, but the expectation of Bruce Campbell, Michael Jai White, and Devon Sawa coming together in one movie, it's leaving us all wishing that there was more for us here. More gore and more humor, a tighter script, or just an actual character and story from Michael Jai White. I mean, he's Michael Jai White. Show some respect for Michael Jai White. And it's not even a mall movie technically, but I felt bad for it. This would have been a mall movie if it had been made earlier, and it's the perfect place to leave us. It's the bitter and used up shopper experience devolved into disillusion and pessimism as a tomb for our society, because everything feels transactional now.
I ran home to tell my dad after I got hired, and he goes, "Welcome to corporate hell, kid. This place isn't impressive. It isn't fun or magical. It's a prison."
That customer experience is now considered the privilege that you even get to buy something. What a bleak place to end this video. Well, okay, maybe you can go watch Fear Street Part 1. It's supposed to have a shopping mall sequence in the first 10 minutes or so, but it's on streaming. I'm not signing up for any streaming services right now. But people seem to like Fear Street, so maybe that would be a pick-me-up if you want to finish the list off, and you can leave a comment, tell me what you think about it, if it's worth it for me to try and find a download or wait until I get whatever streaming cult it's on and then eventually catch up with that. And in reality, where are we now with malls? Private equity. That's where. The big department stores are all collapsing under the weight of debt foisted upon them by private equity. Right now, the biggest mall in my city right now is posting plans to tear it all down and build a park with some high rises with, like little shops at the bottom.
It's Clown Corners, where life slows down to a crawl.
And you know what? Maybe that makes sense. I like parks, and malls have become pretty bleak, but like video stores before them, I will miss the 80s and 90s malls. Do you have a favorite mall? Or did you? Where is it, or was it? Post a comment below. I love reading what you guys have to say and interacting with you guys. And thank Justin. You could also just, if you don't have a favorite mall, thank Justin for this great video idea. I had a blast doing this. Check out his stuff on all of the platforms. Stormland Band. Buy some merch, buy a CD, just go over to him, add a like, something, show some support for a local artist. And I'm gonna see you guys next week.